A young couple was on the brink of a beautiful future. He was devoted, ready to start a new chapter with the love of his life. She was hopeful, dreaming of a perfect wedding and the life they would build together. But hidden beneath the surface was a secret so dark, so unfathomable, that it would end in bloodshed. At first, everything seemed perfect. The couple had been together for years, and after a heartfelt proposal, wedding plans were in full swing. But lurking in the shadows was someone who should have been celebrating their happiness, a man whose role in their lives should have been one of love and guidance. Instead, he harbored a twisted obsession, one that would lead to an act of ultimate betrayal. The man in question. The groom's own father. A man respected by many, but one who carried a secret life, one filled with deception, manipulation, and desires no one saw coming. What happened next is almost too shocking to believe. Behind closed doors, the father seduced his son's fiancée. Whether through charm, coercion, or something even more sinister, she fell into his trap. And the worst part? Their affair left her with something she could never escape, an incurable disease that would change her life forever. When the truth surfaced, it sent shockwaves through their lives. The engagement shattered, hearts broken beyond repair. But that wasn't the worst part. The weight of betrayal turned into something far deadlier. Someone, whether out of revenge or sheer desperation, decided that only one solution remained: murder. Who pulled the trigger? Who paid the ultimate price? And what led to this horrifying crime? Stay with me as we unravel every chilling detail of this shocking case. At the center of this story is Daniel Carter, a young man who, for most of his life, believed in love, trust, and family. He was hardworking, ambitious, and ready to build a future with the woman he adored, Emily Lawson. He had done everything right, treated Emily with love, made plans for their wedding, and even sought advice from his father, Richard Carter, on how to be a great husband. To those around him, Daniel seemed to have it all together. Raised in a stable home, he had a strong moral compass and genuinely looked up to his father. In his eyes, Richard was a man of wisdom, someone he could turn to for guidance and support. What he didn't know was that the very man he admired was about to commit the ultimate betrayal. When he proposed to Emily after 4 years of dating, he never imagined the nightmare that would follow. He never questioned that his father and fiancée had a friendly relationship. After all, she was about to become part of the family. But as the months passed, strange things began to happen. Emily became distant. Richard started acting oddly. The wedding, which was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, began to feel like a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. Emily Lawson was beautiful, intelligent, and full of life. She had met Daniel in college, and when he got down on one knee and asked her to marry him, she felt like she was stepping into the future she had always dreamed of. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe it started as harmless conversations, maybe it was manipulation, or maybe it was something more sinister. But somehow, Emily found herself in a situation she could never have imagined, one that led to irreversible consequences. Whether she willingly engaged in an affair with Richard or was coerced into a dangerous situation remains a mystery. But what is clear is that their secret relationship had devastating consequences. After their brief liaison, Emily received news that no one ever wants to hear: she had tested positive for HIV. Her world crumbled. How did this happen? Who had given it to her? And worst of all, how could she possibly tell Daniel that her life had changed forever? Then, there's Richard Carter, the man who should have been a protector, a role model, a guiding force for his son. Instead, he harbored a dark secret. To the outside world, Richard appeared respectable, maybe even well-liked in the community. But beneath the surface, he was living a double life. Maybe this wasn't his first affair. Maybe he had a history of manipulation, of using his power and influence to get what he wanted. But this time, it wasn't just another betrayal. It was a calculated act that destroyed the lives of those closest to him. Some sources say he pursued Emily, using charm, manipulation, or even coercion to pull her into his web. Others believe it was more predatory, that he took advantage of her trust and vulnerability. Either way, the end result was the same, a brief, hidden relationship that would lead to horrifying consequences. The most shocking part? Richard knew he was HIV positive. He knew the risks. And yet, he carried out his betrayal without remorse, forever altering the course of his son's life and pushing a once happy family toward an unthinkable tragedy. In every crime, there are those who witness the unraveling from the sidelines. Friends noticed the changes, how Emily seemed anxious, how Richard became more secretive, how Daniel began sensing something was off. Some tried to intervene, but by the time they put the pieces together, it was too late. Linda Carter, Richard's wife and Daniel's mother, was likely blindsided. Did she know about her husband's past? Had she ignored warning signs for years? Or was she just another victim of his deception? And then, there were the authorities, the investigators who would later piece together the shocking timeline of betrayal, deception, and murder. They would uncover the ugly truth, but by then, someone had already paid the ultimate price. One moment, they were a family planning a wedding. The next, they were at the center of a crime that would leave one person dead and the rest scarred forever. At the heart of this case lies one question: what drives someone to betray their own flesh and blood in such a horrifying way? And when the truth finally comes out, how far will someone go to seek justice, or revenge? As we dive deeper into this case, we'll uncover the shocking chain of events that turned love into hatred, trust into devastation, and a family into a crime scene. For Daniel Carter and Emily Lawson, their love story was something out of a fairy tale, at least, that's how it seemed. They met in college, a classic case of love at first sight. Daniel, a finance major with dreams of starting his own business, was drawn to Emily's warm personality and kind heart. Emily, a nursing student, found comfort in Daniel's unwavering support and ambition. They were the couple everyone admired, stable, committed, and genuinely in love. After 4 years of dating, Daniel decided it was time to take the next step. He planned the perfect proposal, setting up a romantic evening under the stars at the spot where they had their first date. When he got down on one knee and asked Emily to marry him, there wasn't a doubt in her mind, she said yes. The engagement was everything they had dreamed of. Their families seemed thrilled, especially Daniel's parents, Richard and Linda Carter. Richard, in particular, was highly involved, offering to help with wedding expenses and giving Daniel advice about marriage. Daniel took his father's words to heart, believing Richard to be the wise and experienced man he had always looked up to. Emily and Linda bonded over wedding plans, selecting a venue, choosing flowers, and finalizing the guest list. Emily had always wanted a spring wedding, something intimate yet elegant, and Daniel wanted nothing more than to make her happy. They booked a charming venue just outside their hometown, a beautiful estate surrounded by lush greenery. Everything was falling into place. But amidst the excitement, something was shifting. Emily started to seem distracted, her once excited demeanor dimming. At first, Daniel thought it was just wedding stress. Planning such an important event could be overwhelming, after all. But there was something else, something deeper. She began pulling away from him in small but noticeable ways. She canceled dinner plans at the last minute, avoided intimate conversations, and seemed lost in thought. Daniel noticed, but he never suspected anything was truly wrong. He chalked it up to nerves, assuming that once they were officially married, everything would go back to normal. But what he didn't know was that Emily was hiding a secret so devastating it would tear their future apart. Unbeknownst to Daniel, Emily had been keeping in touch with Richard more than she let on. What had started as casual conversations, his father checking in on her and offering support, had evolved into something more. Maybe she had confided in him during moments of stress. Maybe he had taken advantage of her vulnerability. Maybe it was something even darker. Whatever the circumstances, the reality remained the same. Behind Daniel's back, his fiancée and his father had crossed a line that could never be undone. And soon, the consequences of that betrayal would come crashing down, shattering the perfect life Daniel had envisioned. The wedding was just months away, but instead of walking down the aisle, the only thing waiting for them was devastation, betrayal, and, ultimately, murder. No one saw it coming. To the outside world, Daniel Carter and Emily Lawson were the picture of a perfect couple. Their love story had been years in the making, and with wedding plans underway, they were preparing to spend forever together. But beneath the surface, something sinister was brewing, an unthinkable betrayal that would destroy everything. It started subtly, in ways that might not have raised suspicion at first. Richard Carter, Daniel's father, had always been a charismatic man. He was respected in the community, well-spoken, and carried an air of authority that made people listen when he talked. To his son, he was a role model. To his wife, Linda, he was a provider. And to Emily, he was her future father-in-law, a man who had always treated her kindly. But at some point, that kindness shifted into something darker. The exact details of how the affair began remain unclear. Did Emily willingly engage in a secret romance, swept up by Richard's charm? Or was she manipulated, pressured into something she didn't know how to escape? Some speculate that Richard preyed on her vulnerabilities, offering comfort when she was overwhelmed with wedding stress, making her feel understood in ways she didn't even realize she was craving. Others believe it was a slow, calculated seduction. What is known for sure is that lines were crossed. Whether it was through stolen moments, late-night conversations, or something far more sinister, Emily and Richard became entangled in a secret that could never stay buried. At first, Emily likely told herself it was a mistake. Maybe she convinced herself it had only happened once and that it wouldn't happen again. But secrets have a way of growing, of becoming harder to contain. And the deeper she got, the more impossible it became to turn back. Then, came the devastating revelation: Emily tested positive for HIV. Panic set in. There was only one person who could have given it to her, Richard. The man she had been secretly involved with. The weight of that realization must have been unbearable. Not only had she betrayed Daniel, but now she was carrying a permanent reminder of that mistake. She was left with an impossible choice. Should she come clean to Daniel and tell him everything? Should she confess to the affair and the disease that came with it? Or should she stay silent, hoping to keep the truth buried forever? But the truth always finds a way to surface. And when it did, it sent shockwaves through everyone's lives. Daniel, upon discovering the affair, was shattered. His entire world, his future, his family, and the love he had trusted, was ripped apart in an instant. His father, the man he had admired his whole life, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. And Emily, the woman he had planned to marry, had been part of it all. The revelation was the breaking point. And what followed next would turn this tale of betrayal into a crime scene soaked in blood. Secrets don't stay buried forever. No matter how well they're hidden, they always find a way to surface. And for Daniel Carter, the truth about his fiancée and his father would come crashing down on him in the most devastating way. Emily Lawson had been acting strangely for weeks. She was distant, her once bright smile dimmed by something she refused to talk about. Daniel could feel the shift between them, but every time he asked if something was wrong, she brushed him off. Just wedding stress, she'd say, forcing a reassuring smile. But deep down, Daniel knew something wasn't right. Emily wasn't the only one acting differently. His father, Richard Carter, had also started behaving in ways that unsettled him. He had always been a confident, self-assured man, but lately, there was an edge to him, a nervous energy that Daniel had never seen before. He would avoid eye contact, deflect certain conversations, and sometimes disappear for hours without explanation. The more Daniel tried to ignore the feeling that something was wrong, the more the unease clawed at him. Then, everything fell apart. The truth comes to light. It started with a phone call. Emily had gone to the doctor for what she thought was a routine checkup, but the news she received changed everything. She tested positive for HIV. Her hands trembled as she listened to the doctor explain what this meant. It felt like the walls were closing in on her. There was no way to hide this. No way to pretend everything was fine. She had to tell Daniel. But before she could, Daniel found out on his own. Whether he saw a message, overheard a conversation, or noticed the fear in Emily's eyes, something pushed him to dig deeper. And when he did, he uncovered the horrifying truth: Emily had been sleeping with his father. His world shattered in an instant. At first, there was disbelief. It had to be a mistake. Emily wouldn't do this to him. His father, his own father, would never betray him like that. But the more he pressed for answers, the more the reality sank in. Emily broke down in tears, confessing everything. She told him about the affair, about how it started with innocent conversations and spiraled into something she never meant to happen. She told him about the disease, about how Richard had infected her. Daniel could barely process what he was hearing. His father had slept with his fiancée. His father had knowingly passed on a deadly virus. His father had destroyed his future in a way no apology could ever fix. His hands clenched into fists, his pulse pounded in his ears. He had spent his whole life looking up to this man, trusting him, admiring him. And now, that same man had taken everything from him. Daniel didn't hesitate. Blinded by rage, he stormed into his parents' house, his heart pounding as he searched for Richard. The man he once loved as a father was now a stranger, someone he could barely look at without feeling sick. When Richard saw Daniel's face, he knew. The air between them was suffocating. Linda Carter, oblivious to the chaos unfolding, stood frozen in confusion as her son locked eyes with her husband, his face twisted with fury. "You destroyed everything," Daniel spat, his voice shaking. Richard tried to stay calm, but there was no denying the fear in his eyes. "Son, let's talk about this." "Don't call me that." Daniel's voice thundered through the house. "You're not my father. You're a monster." Richard's gaze darted to Linda, who looked between them in horror. "What is he talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't answer her. He was focused on Richard. "Did you ever stop to think about what you were doing?" Daniel demanded. "Did you care at all about me? About Emily? About Mom?" Richard's lips parted, but no words came out. There was no justification for what he had done. And then, everything spiraled out of control. In the heat of the moment, emotions reached a boiling point. Whether it was Daniel's rage exploding or Richard's desperate attempt to defuse the situation, something pushed them past the point of no return. The confrontation turned violent, the years of trust shattered beyond repair. And before the night was over, one of them wouldn't make it out alive. Betrayal, rage, and heartbreak, emotions that, when pushed to their limits, can turn deadly. For Daniel Carter, the man he had trusted and admired his entire life had become his worst enemy. His father, Richard Carter, had not only slept with his fiancée, Emily Lawson, but had knowingly infected her with HIV, leaving a permanent stain on their future. Daniel had confronted Richard in a moment of fury, but words alone could not contain the storm brewing inside him. What started as a verbal altercation escalated into something far more violent, something irreversible. The air in the Carter family home was thick with tension. Linda Carter, Richard's wife and Daniel's mother, stood frozen in horror as the confrontation spiraled out of control. Emily had refused to come, too ashamed, too afraid of what Daniel might do. But even she could feel the weight of the moment as she waited helplessly outside in her car. Daniel's entire body shook with anger as he stood face to face with Richard. The man who had raised him. The man who had taught him right from wrong. The man who had just destroyed his life. "You ruined everything," Daniel seethed, his fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. Richard, always the smooth talker, tried to regain control. "Listen to me, son. I know what I did was wrong, but we can get through this. I never meant. Don't you dare try to justify this. Daniel's voice cracked with rage. His vision blurred as he stepped closer, his chest heaving. You didn't accidentally do this. You knew. You knew you were sick, and you still, his voice caught in his throat. You still touched her. Richard took a deep breath, his demeanor shifting. The regret in his voice vanished. She wanted it just as much as I did, he said coldly. That was it. That was the moment something inside Daniel snapped. Without thinking, without hesitation, Daniel lunged. The impact sent them both crashing into a glass coffee table, shattering it beneath them. Linda screamed, rushing forward to pull her son away, but Daniel's rage was unrelenting. His fists connected with Richard's face, years of trust and admiration replaced by nothing but hatred. Richard fought back, shoving Daniel off him, sending him stumbling toward the kitchen counter. But Daniel wasn't finished. His hands found the cold, metallic handle of a knife. Everything happened in an instant. Before Richard could react, Daniel drove the blade into his chest. The world went silent. Richard gasped, his hands shaking as he looked down at the growing crimson stain on his shirt. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the hardwood floor, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. Linda fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Oh my God, what have you done? Daniel stood over his father, his own breathing ragged. The weight of what had just happened sank in like a lead weight in his chest. Richard's eyes locked onto his son's one last time. There was no anger, no fight left in him. Just the cruel realization that his own actions had led him to this moment. And then, he was gone. Emily, still waiting outside, saw the front door fly open as Linda ran out, her hands covered in blood, screaming for help. Emily's heart pounded as she sprinted inside, only to stop cold at the sight before her. Richard's lifeless body. Daniel standing over him, the knife still in his trembling hands. No, Emily whispered, covering her mouth in shock. Daniel turned to her, his eyes empty. It's over, he said, his voice hollow. He can't hurt us anymore. But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The police arrived minutes later, sirens cutting through the night. Linda was hysterical, Emily was in shock, and Daniel, he didn't resist. He knew what he had done. He didn't fight when they handcuffed him, didn't argue when they read him his rights. As they led him away, he cast one last look at his father's lifeless body. A man who had once been his hero. A man who had destroyed everything in the name of his own selfish desires. Justice had been served, but at what cost? Because now, another life was ruined. Daniel had killed the man who had betrayed him. But was it justice? Or was it murder? But what do you think? Was this an act of justice, a son seeking revenge for the ultimate betrayal? Or was it cold-blooded murder? Could Daniel have handled this differently, or was his rage inevitable? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like this video, it helps more people discover these shocking true crime cases.